So welcome to the Holistic Cats Conference. And with me is Ingrid King. She's an award-winning author of 5 cat books, including Buckley's Story, Lessons from a Feline Master Teacher, Purrs of Wisdom, Enlightenment Feline Style, and Tortitude, the Big Book of Cats with Big Attitudes. Ingrid founded and published The Conscious Cat, a website dedicated to conscious living, health, and happiness for cats and their humans, for 13 years. She's continuing the work she began on The Conscious Cat with her current website, Purrs of Wisdom. Ingrid is a former veterinary hospital manager, a certified veterinary journalist, professional member of the Cat Writers Association. She is passionate about feline nutrition and loves helping cat parents find the best diet for lifelong health. She shared her Northern Virginia home with her 13-year-old Tortie, Allegra. So welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited about what you're going to talk about today, and that is you're going to decipher the cat foods for us. And I guess the first thing you need to look at is what's the best type of food for cats? What should we be looking at?
Okay, so in terms of what's the best food, just like with people, there is no one best diet for every cat, but there are some commonalities that I think are important to understand. And probably the most important thing is that dry food is not bio-appropriate nutrition for cats. It is overly processed. It doesn't give them enough moisture. It usually has a whole bunch of ingredients that you don't want to see in a food. So that's at the bottom of the list. The next best choice would be canned food, which is still highly processed because it has to be manufactured at pretty high temperatures, so that does destroy some nutrients, but it meets the moisture requirements. If the ingredients are quality ingredients, it meets the protein requirements of the cat. So that is most definitely a better choice than dry. The next better choice that I recommend is a gently cooked diet. Unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of commercial diets available that are like that. So you'd have to be pretty dedicated and kind of investigate making your own. And for someone like me who doesn't cook a whole lot, that has never really been an option. The ultimate diet, I believe, for a cat is a raw, unprocessed diet. And I know that sounds scary to a lot of cat parents, but it's really not that hard to do, especially today where there are a lot of really good commercial raw diets on the market.
Yeah, you're right. That field has opened up in the last decade.
Yeah.
We're seeing lots of different flavors, different types of meat.
Right.
And it's just far more available. Before, if a pet store had one brand, it was, wow, it's great.
Exactly.
Now 3 or 4 brands competing against each other, which is wonderful to see. Yeah. So a commonality between all the speakers in this conference is that they say no dry food. So I just want to get your take on it. Why shouldn't cats eat dry food?
Well, cats in the wild evolved as desert animals, so they have a very low thirst drive. So their moisture derives from the food they eat, which in most cases is going to be meat. So it's, the moisture in a mouse, the moisture in a rabbit, whatever they hunt in the wild. Dry food eliminates that. So cats who eat primarily dry food need to be encouraged to drink a lot of water, and that doesn't usually work very well. So they end up with usually urinary tract problems, kidney problems. Dry food also, excuse me, is too high in carbohydrates. So we end up with diabetic cats caused by the food that their well-meaning parents are feeding them. There's just a whole slew of problems with it.
Yeah, there was a thrust a couple of years ago by one major pet food manufacturer. And what they talked about is having 3 bowls for your cat. One bowl of water, 1 bowl of dry food, and then 1 bowl of this wet stuff, as in it was I think it was a powder that you mix in with water, and so it was like a slurry. And the idea it was geared so that it could attract cats to it, and they would lap it up and get water into them. right?
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
there it is. We've got dry food
that.
causing a problem. Yeah, but I
Right.
have a product now that I can sell you that
Yeah,
will solve it,
right.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just really, yeah, there are so many issues with dry food, and the holistic veterinarians are on that tack, and that is, hey, let's get them off this stuff
Exactly.
for all the
Exactly.
reasons that you just said. So if I'm looking for commercial cat food, so I'm trying to find out what should I feed my kitty cat, what should I be looking for?
So setting aside the dry, we already decided we don't want that. So for all the other types of food, for canned, for gently cooked, for raw, what I look for is quality ingredients. So the primary ingredient needs to be meat, and it can be pretty much anything. I sometimes chuckle at some of the meats that are available, because when have you ever seen a cat take down a cow? But beef is an appropriate choice if your cat wants to eat it. So beef, poultry, anything like that. There are some really exotic proteins available now that probably okay, but it needs to be the first ingredient. It also shouldn't contain any grains or fillers, not even rice or barley. That sounds healthy to us, but they're still carbohydrates, and cats don't need them. Excuse me, my voice keeps going. I also look for no added ingredients, no artificial colors, flavors, preservatives. We don't want any of that in our food. Ideally, I look for GMO-free foods, but they're still harder to find. Some brands are, some brands aren't. It would be nice if we could say, yes, they should all be GMO-free, but to me, that's not a deal breaker if everything else is good. Organic, again, would be nice if it was all organic, but it's very hard to find 100% organic cat food. What I look for, rather than looking for the organic label, if it's too hard to find, is that whatever meat sources they use that they're not fed with antibiotics, and that they're ideally humanely raised. And that's just one of my touchy-feely things that I like to look for. I also like in canned foods, I prefer foods that don't use carrageenan as a binder. All canned foods are going to have some kind of a binder to hold it together. There are some studies that show that carrageenan can cause intestinal problems, inflammation. They're on the human side, they're not on the cat side, but if it does it to humans, I don't think it's too much of a leap to think it's not going to be all that great for cats. So I try to look for other binders. There are better options than carrageenan. And I also tell people to avoid fish-based foods, not necessarily completely, but I'm not crazy about a diet that's primarily fish. Two reasons. One is heavy metal contamination, because the fish used in cat food is low on the food chain because it's cheap. So I'm sorry, high on the food chain because it's cheap, and it's going to be highly contaminated. Possibly, they're all going to say it's not, but and then the other reason is phosphorus content. Fish is high in phosphorus, and that's something that we are concerned about, because it does impact the urinary tract and the kidneys, and we want to avoid that. Another issue with fish-based foods is that they can make cats addicted to them, because yes, they taste good, they smell good, and it's quite possible that if you only feed fish, they're never going to touch anything else. So I like to use fish as an occasional treat, but not as a mainstay in a diet.
The main, it's echoed in our nutrition, and that is, they used to say, yeah, fish is really good for you, and then they found out, oh, it's mercury in there. Another
thing. Right.
And then they backed it down to once, twice a week for me.
Yeah.
And so I agree, because whenever we're dealing with cats or dogs, they're eating that food, and it's very easy for some owners to say, well, they like that food, so I'm going to feed that one forever.
Yeah.
Technically, it should be nutritionally balanced that it can do that, but we need the variation. We need
absolutely
get that in there.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why, a varied diet is important. It's what you just addressed, but it's also the manufacturers are going to change their formulas. And if you have a cat who's stuck on one particular flavor of one particular brand and they change the formula, you may find yourself with a cat who won't eat. And then you're going to desperately go and get, every single can on the shelf at the pet store, trying to get your cat to eat something else. And that's just not a good situation to be in. Another reason too is, I feed primarily raw, frozen raw. I feel like I should knock on wood. We haven't had any issues with power outages, but it does happen. And if that's the only thing your cat will eat and you have a power outage and all your food goes bad, then what are you going to do? So variety, I think, is just really important.
Yeah. They're definitely, I agree. And as we should be rotating foods during the week. And we've done that with our cats and our dog, that we don't feed them a particular protein, more than a couple of days in a row.
Right.
We're switching up. One safeguard for raw food and power outages and things like that is getting hold of some freeze-dried of food, and that way you've got the raw food. All you need to do is add water, and you're pretty well back to where it looks normal.
Right.
And I use that for camping.
That's a good, yeah. Now, my experience has been that not all cats who eat the fresh raw will consider the freeze-dried raw food. They look at it and the texture is just different, and it just depends. So again, this is something where you want to experiment before you find yourself in an emergency situation, and make sure that you have some sort of fallback for, when you need it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also freeze-dried isn't cheap. You're really paying for that processing. It's wonderful, but it's not cheap stuff. Yeah.
Right.
But I agree. Yeah, let's make sure we have a cat that will accept different foods, different flavors, and that way, because I've had clients that have been feeding one canned food, for a year, and then all of a sudden the company has a recall or something, and you can't get hold of it. And,
right.
And then they're calling us saying, "Well, what else can I feed?" Well, I said, "Well, it's going to depend on your cat now." So
right, exactly. Yeah,
that's called experimentation.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing I know you're certainly looking at is that veterinarians don't tend to recommend what you're recommending right now.
Unfortunately, that is still true. I think it depends. People looking for holistic veterinarians are probably not going to run into that, but generally the recommendation from the average conventional vet is going to be dry food may be supplemented with some canned food. And generally those are diets that come from, 2 or 3 major companies, and the ingredient list is not what I would recommend. People they don't understand why their vets don't recommend better foods. And I think there are a couple of reasons. One is, looking at physicians on the human side, your pediatrician probably is also not the best source for, nutritional information. That's really not their focus. I mean, sure, they're going to give you some basics, but they're not going to be your primary source of, what a really healthy diet is. The second reason is that, unfortunately, the nutrition curriculum in vet schools is very limited, and it is generally sponsored by the same major companies that sell these diets to veterinary clinics. So, it is a conflict of interest probably. And, it's easier for a young vet straight out of school to go, oh, wait, that's what they told me about in school, so that's what I'm going to recommend. Also, I don't know if this is still true, but when I worked in veterinary practices, this is, 15, 16 years ago now, we got free food from these companies. So what do you think, a veterinary technician is going to recommend if they haven't educated themselves about nutrition? Well, I get this and I feed this to my cat and she's doing great. So there's a lot of, conflict of interest and lack of time really to look into better nutrition.
Yeah.
And that's so much respect for veterinarians who take the time to educate themselves about nutrition, because veterinary medicine, especially today, is just, it's mind-blowing how quickly things change, how many new, advances come up every day, and how much time it takes for a veterinarian to stay up to date, in addition to an already tremendous workload. So I have a lot of respect for veterinarians that take the time to educate themselves about what true whole nutrition really is about.
Yeah. Yeah. When I went through vet school, and things haven't changed a lot, unfortunately, but I got my hour of nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That's all we got. And to back it up, we got a book, about that thick, written by a guy called Mark Morris,
Mm-hmm.
founder of Hills.
Yeah.
And so it was a case of, oh, this is the book that's the Bible, literally.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Reading. And at the same time, guess what? We got a big discount on foods, right? So it's kind of like, guys, this is the food you should be feeding, and all that. So yeah, you come out of vet school very tainted on what you think should be the right foods, and there's certainly the companies make a big push of getting into the early years of veterinarians, yeah, and then it takes a while for a veterinarian to finally say, maybe there's something better.
Right.
And then you start looking at it, and very simply, the stuff that holistic veterinarians are saying, which is what similar to what you would have on your website and things like that. With a conventional veterinarian, that is a blasphemy.
Right.
Because it's against what they've learned all the way through, and so it takes a long time to change the attitudes.
And it makes it very difficult for clients, because they do want what's best for their cat. And that's what the veterinarian wants too, in everything other than nutrition. So it's really hard to go against what a veterinarian that you otherwise are really comfortable with tells you about nutrition.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So anyway, the thing is, things are changing, because the big change in the last 20 years, of course, is this little thing called the internet.
Exactly.
So people are getting educated.
Yeah.
Finding more. And then we're doing conferences like this. We're getting the information out.
Right.
So do you have any, like when we talk about commercial foods, that's our focus today with you. Do you have a list, or do you have something that people can refer to say?
Yeah, I maintain that one. Yeah, I maintain a list of brands that I recommend on my website, and these are all brands that I've tried myself, that I either, that I currently feed, or that I've fed in the past, and that I think are good brands. So, and I have it for all the different categories, for, frozen, raw, fresh cooked, gently cooked. I think there's only one right now that's out there. Canned, and then also the freeze-dried raw, which I have never had any luck with any of my own cats, but I know a lot of people like it, and it is a good choice. So
yeah, I've used it in cats and dogs, and as long as you rehydrate it and make it look like it was before it was freeze-dried,
right,
you can fool a lot of them.
Yeah, I find with cats, texture is a big thing for some cats. It's even with canned food, from brand to brand, if the texture is different, nope, not touching it.
Yeah, no, we get cats that are pate cats.
Exactly.
What cats are funk cats?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What cat are you?
Right.
And you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the foods you're talking about, like you sort of judged, quite often, especially with raw foods, they're quite regional.
Yeah, on my list, I'll ship throughout the US. I don't know about Canada. I know that's always a challenge, but they do ship throughout the US.
Yeah. Where are you located, Ingrid?
I'm just outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. So that can have an effect. Like you say, the foods that I can get in Canada are, first off, they're very limited compared to what's available in the States.
Uh-huh.
and they're different brands.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the option to make your own, and there are some really good recipes available
Right.
online. It just, it does take a little bit more effort, and you need to be careful about where you source your meat, and you need to supplement properly. So it's a little more complicated, but not that hard to do. So
Okay, yeah, with recently with this, since that virus came along and such, the price of canned food has gone through the roof.
I know.
So what I'm finding now is that in some cases, it's actually cheaper to feed raw food than the canned food.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
which is great, but for the wrong reason.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess, budget is always going to be a consideration. And that's one of the things I stress when I do consultations, is that I don't ever want anyone to feel that, well, I can't afford to do the right thing for my cat. I can't afford to do, this diet that you recommend. And then I just, I try to help find a canned food that may not be ideal, but it's still going to be better than the best dry food. And they need to understand that that's still, something good that they're doing for their cat. Because I don't ever want to shame someone into, well, you need to spend more money on your cat's food. That's just not right. So,
yeah. So yeah, there's always alternatives somehow.
right.
That's the key, and it's just like us. If I wanted to be on the ultimate diet, yeah, it does cost more money.
Of course. Yeah.
Just the way
Right.
it is. So, but anyway, well, thank you very much for coming on. Have you got any final words on food for our viewers?
Do the best you can within your budget and what your cat will eat. I mean, that's the driving force. No matter what you put in front of them, it's got to be something that they end up eating. So
Exactly. Yeah, cats can be picky. They can also be addicts as in they're just on one food. And
right.
yeah, and doing even the transition from dry to some type of wet food for some cats is an Olympic experience.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot of patience.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. So if anyone wants more information on picking brands, check out Ingrid's website. We got the link right below. Okay. So thank you very much, Ingrid.
You're welcome. It was fun.
Okay, that's great. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next webinar.